As the death toll in Libya soars, families struggle to bury their dead, and destroyed roads make relief efforts even harder.
€345 million. The EU fined social media giant TikTok for failing to protect children's privacy under its data protection rules. The former president of the Spanish Football Federation, Luis Rubiales, receives a restraining order barring him from contacting national player Jenni Hermoso.
Kim Jong-un visits a Russian plane factory as Moscow appears to be cozying up to the North Korean leader for military support. With summers warmer than ever before, marine scientists in the UK observe a rise in sea temperatures of 5 degrees in the North Atlantic.
The UN has launched an initial appeal for over €66 million to help 250,000 people worst hit by the catastrophic floods in Libya, which have claimed thousands of lives. Residents of the Libyan city of Derna have been burying bodies in mass graves, but still they line the streets, and officials say the death toll could triple.
So I cannot really confirm the final numbers, but it's really a high level of magnitude, and I'm afraid we will hear really large numbers, maybe even more than what has been confirmed so far.
Libya's Eastern administration in Benghazi city approved a budget of 10 billion dinars, nearly €2 billion, and Parliament announced the formation of a committee to manage the aftermath of the floods. Over 11,300 people are now confirmed to have died in the disaster. Thousands more could be buried under drifts of mud and concrete, and rescuers have struggled to bring in heavy equipment on the destroyed roads.
The European Union has fined TikTok €345 million for failing to protect children's privacy under the bloc's strict data protection rules. The video sharing platform is headquartered in Dublin. The Irish Data Protection Commission, acting on behalf of the EU, also ordered the Chinese-owned social media giant to bring its operation into compliance within 3 months. The fine follows a 2-year investigation into infringements that occurred between July and December 2020. In its decision, the Irish authority concluded that children's accounts had been made public by default during the sign-up process. Over 1.677 billion people globally use the platform, 1.1 billion of whom are active users. The European Commission is not the first executive body to punish TikTok for failing to protect the private data of minors. The social network was fined some €5 million by the US in 2019 and $750,000 by the Netherlands in 2021. The former president of Spain's Football Federation has been handed a restraining order barring him from contacting national player Jenni Hermoso. Luis Rubiales appeared in court in Madrid for kissing Hermoso on the lips after Spain beat Australia in the World Cup final. Prosecutors are accusing Rubiales of sexual assault and coercion. Rubiales claims the act was consensual and denies pressuring Hermoso to speak out in his defence after the scandal erupted. The judges began a preliminary investigation and will decide whether the case should go to trial. He also rejected prosecutors' requests for Rubiales to check in with the court every 15 days. If he's found guilty, Rubiales could be fined or given a prison sentence of up to 4 years. Hermoso, who has just been nominated for FIFA World Cup Player of the Year, has repeatedly denied she consented to be kissed. The incident unleashed a wave of anger in Spain and abroad and intensified the debate within the country about men's attitudes and behaviour towards women.
A visit by North Korean leader to an aircraft factory in eastern Russia underscores the deepening military ties between the two countries. Kim Jong-un arrived in Russia on Tuesday for an extended trip, and Pyongyang is expected to agree to supply weapons to Moscow for its war in Ukraine. And now a reciprocal visit has been announced. President Putin has turned to Kim for military aid as Russia struggles to resupply its forces. North Korea hopes to get Russian technology for its nuclear missile program in return. The West has threatened further sanctions against Pyongyang if it sends weapons to Russia. Vladimir Zelensky meeting representatives of Ukraine's Jewish community in Kiev. More than 20,000 Jewish pilgrims have travelled from Israel to Ukraine's Uman, one of the birthplaces of the Hasidic movement ahead of Rosh Hashanah, despite warnings from Kiev not to travel due to the Russian invasion. Later in his evening address, Zelensky announced the opening of the office of the International Criminal Court in Ukraine.
В Україні запрацював польовий офіс Міжнародного кримінального суду. І це найбільше представництво суду за межами Гааги. Саме така співпраця допомагає нам наближати момент відновлення справедливості для України і усіх наших людей, які постраждали від цієї війни. Момент законних і заслужених вироків для російських злочинців.
Ukrainian authorities on Telegram say they have ordered evacuations of civilians in the Kherson region, partly controlled by Russian forces and regularly targeted by shelling. The Kherson governor also indicated that regional authorities were preparing for emergency situations this coming autumn and winter for electricity supplies, as the Ukrainian offensive enters its fourth month.
The long-range ATACMS missile, which can be fired from this HIMARS missile launcher, has always been on Ukraine's shopping list of weapons, and now reports suggest the US may be about to supply them. The missile has a range of about 300 kilometres and will give Kiev a big military boost. President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to visit Washington, D.C. next week as Congress debates whether to approve more aid for Ukraine. And the missile's target would likely be the Crimean Peninsula, which is very strategically important to Russia.
Este aumento de la apuesta lo que pretende darle un empujón a la guerra y apuntaría directamente no a ganancias territoriales pequeñas en las zonas adyacentes, sino que vamos a ir directamente por Crimea. 2024 es un año políticamente muy sensible. Hay elecciones en Estados Unidos, hay elecciones al Parlamento Europeo, pueden venir otros gobiernos y cambian los jugadores y el juego puede que no sea el mismo.
With winter on its way, the window of opportunity for Ukraine and its counter-offensive is narrowing. But some rules of the game have to be kept, in particular Kiev's promise not to use Western weapons inside Russia.
In terms of guarantees, there has to be enough trust that the political leadership has enough control over the military leadership. It doesn't look like the political leadership has all the control and all the trust, because we don't know how the new defense minister will be acting, what his strategy will be, what he will be pursuing.
Billions of euros of arms are also promised for Ukraine from European states. Denmark and the Netherlands will send over 70 F-16 fighter jets. Germany will deliver a modest 40 armoured vehicles, but Poland will supply nearly 500 HIMARS missile launchers, which can be used to fire ATACMS missiles.
The cry of Fridays for Future is once again being heard around the globe, including here in Berlin, where thousands of young climate activists have been raising their voices to demand urgent action to curb global warming. The United Nations warned last week that countries are a long way from limiting temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, as agreed in Paris in 2015. The Northern Hemisphere has just experienced the hottest summer ever recorded.
Off the southwest coast of Britain, on the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean, scientists from the Marine Biological Association have been observing alarming sea surface temperatures. A constant concern, but this year more than ever, at the beginning of the summer, temperatures were up to 5 degrees warmer than the average.
Sea temperatures are still almost 2 degrees higher than the long-term average, and they've been high pretty much all of this year.
The team hasn't just been observing the temperatures, but for over a decade, the kelp in this part of southwest England. And earlier this summer, the temperatures were so alarming to push the kelp to the limit of what it can cope with. And that matters because it's the foundation of the marine ecosystems that surround Britain.
A few degrees doesn't sound like very much, but from a marine environment which is relatively very thermally stable, that could potentially have a huge impact. But that's what some of our research is hoping to find out.
The team has been running experiments on the health of kelp and seagrass, both in the sea and in the laboratory, to see what's likely to happen if the trend continues. Seagrass being examined in current and projected future water temperatures.
This year in particular, the North Atlantic has been alarmingly warm. Ocean warming and marine heat waves are going to ramp up over the coming years to decades, with huge consequences for fisheries, for aquaculture, for the conservation of marine ecosystems.
Kelp and seagrass support ecosystems around Europe exactly the same way as coral does. But unlike coral, kelp is found in huge quantities across the globe.
It does feel like climate Armageddon might be getting that a little bit closer, and some of the things that we've considered to be almost fantasy and science fiction are at risk of happening within our lifetimes.
Data collated by Copernicus, the Earth observation component of the European Union's space programme, highlights 2023 as an alarming year in terms of sea surface temperature.
We've seen examples in the Pacific where we've had die-offs and big oxygen low zones associated with the warming. And it wouldn't be untrue to say that we may be on the edge of seeing that around the UK and European seas as well.
As temperatures test the foundations of marine ecosystems, scientists continue to analyse what's in store in the short term and what the oceans could look like for future generations. Luke Hanrahan, Euronews, Plymouth.